So here the individual dancer. Now why was the kalapam so important also is that the kalapam, being an exposition of complex emotional experiences, demanded more from one performer in terms of virtuosity, in terms of stamina, in terms of memory power, as well as in level of individual training. Whereas in a corps de ballet, you had number of people supporting each other, and wherever the main performers, there was no single main performer. Wherever one character was performing, the other character would support or interject with something. It was like prompting virtually. And there was a lot of improvisation. Whereas here, in kalapam, the person who would be prompting would be only prompting at the given moments. To talk about Krishna's description, to talk about her viraha, to talk about, Chandropalambhana, Vayupalambhana, and so on. Therefore, the dancer as an individual had to be strong in memory, strong in stamina, strong in presentation, and strong in being able to command the attention of a vast audience while being alone on stage for long periods of time. But another development which happened simultaneously with the kalapam presentation becoming popular, more and more popular, is that small items were introduced, individual items. They were introduced in the kalapams. I talked about this at length with Sri Vedantam Satyanarayan Sharma Garu, because many times I have wondered, when he is dancing Usha Parinam, suddenly he breaks into Krishna Shabdam or something like this, which is unrelated to that particular theme. And I've meant to ask him this, so when I was in Kuchipudi recently, we spoke about it, and he said, "Idi ma sampradayamlo undi." We have this practice because wherever there were moments of tedium, in between, you see, you have a dancer. Today's Bhama Kalapam we round off in 20 minutes. But those days they used to do it for 3 days or even 7 days, 9 days also, and so on. Now, there one dancer going on doing abhinaya for hours together, and then also at dramatic moments it was required. For instance, there is a Satyabhama Murchapattu, where she faints because of her viraha from, she's missing Lord Krishna. Now you cannot have Satyabhama doing Madana, 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 and then fainting, and immediately getting up and going into the next sequence where she is cursing the moon for causing this fainting. So the Kuchipudi Bhagavatalu are very, very perceptive. So when she fainted, and then they had to be a sort of suggestion of a change of mood. That is the time they would take the young boys who were still under training, and they would say, item adakra. They would say, come and do one. There was no concept of items yet. This is what I'm coming to. But they would come and ask the young boys who were still under training, daruche, idaruche, some daru which they had learnt. Only thing was, they would also take care to see that suppose Bhama Kalapam is being danced and Satyabhama has fainted. That boy who would come, he would perform Krishna Shabdam or Tarangam or something addressed to Lord Krishna, wherein even dramatically it would network with the main theme. There was a networking. It was almost as if a Sakhi of Satyabhama was coming and praising Krishna, flattering him, so that he need not inflict this torture on this poor lady. Similarly, they would do a Tarangam, invoking Krishna and so on. So they would introduce items like this. And this is really the beginning of the introduction of solo items in Kuchipudi. Now, keeping in view the requirement and taste of the audience, such dance items were introduced. But sometimes they were ostensibly unrelated to the main story also. Because I asked a lot of Kuchipudi gurus, why did they do Salam Daru? It had nothing to do with Bhama or anything. Rajasri Bhosala Kula Chandra, Ratipati Sundara Raja Narendra, Raja Tulaja Maharaja Tanuja. This one has nothing to do with Bhama Kalapa. And of course it's a much later, this thing, the composition, and taken from other parts of Telugu-speaking land. So how did this come? Now, here I would like to stick my neck out and hazard a guess. An interesting point which arises is how and where the lyrics and compositions, dance material for such solo items was drawn. From where was it drawn? Because according to what we are told, the Kuchipudi Bhagavatamila families were mostly Vaidiki Brahmins, and in their families, females never took part in the kalapams. They were not encouraged to dance. All this is well established. The the wandering nature of their troupe movement gives rise to the possibility that dance compositions of other existing solo dance systems which were also being practiced in Andhra at the same time may have been drawn into the repertoire of the Bhagavatulu during their wanderings. There would be normal logic if you apply. There would be no need for a Vaidiki Brahmana, Kuchipudi Bhagavata, who was actually dedicated to the cause of Bhakti Prachara only, to dance in praise of Tulajaji or anybody else, for that matter. Because, as we are repeatedly told, the attempt of the kalapam is to highlight the submission and the sublimation of Jivatma, apropos Paramatma. Now, if this was the main thrust of Kuchipudi, and Siddhendra Yogi actually built the Kuchipudi dance drama around these principles, then where would be the need to bow before a mere mortal? So, I will be making the reference. I have talked to a number of Kuchipudi gurus and practitioners, aging practitioners who have lived for many years during the period of change and seen it. They have told me that there is a possibility that dance compositions of other existing solo dance systems may have been drawn into the repertoire of the Bhagavatams, or even that compositions which were traditionally danced by court dancers employed by the royal families of various Telugu-speaking areas may have been given in humble exchange to the learned Kuchipudi Brahmins who are already adept in the principles of Natya Shastra. The advantage of the Brahmins was that their Ucharana and their the analysis of Sanskrit shlokas and the breakup which was required and the understanding of the chandas, such things were discussed in a healthy kind of an interaction, and they would give whatever they knew in exchange for certain items which they witnessed in the courts, and with all honor and humility, the dancers or the poets would offer them these compositions in return. And that is how, when they came back to their homeland, they do this solo items addressed to different kings. Now, I'd like to mention here, you see, this information is important here, it's relevant here, because it is not out of place here, particularly to mention that the Kuchipudi Bhagavatulu who lived in the last 80 years have directly imparted text and presentation of Golla Kalapam and Bhama Kalapam to the Devadasis, who are not called Devadasis, we don't have that term, the Kalavantulu in Andhra Pradesh. They were the ones who were employed as the Rajanartakis or even as the temple dancers. They have learnt, some of them have learnt directly from the Kuchipudi Bhagavatulu, the text and presentation. However, I'm not going to elaborate in this trend. It's very dangerous because I might just go off into another line of thinking. But I'll mention here that the names of those who taught. Mahankali Chalapati, he taught to Chittajallu Lakshmi, Chittajallu Venkatratnam, Chittajallu Vani Vilasam, Chittajallu Uma Maheshwari, and Puvula Nagaraja Kumari. They are all names to you, but I hope sometime very soon we'll have an opportunity to discuss also the Devadasi system of dancing at some point of time. Vedantam Lakshmi Narayan Shastri doesn't need any introduction. Besides that famous example of teaching Bala Saraswati, which everybody knows, he also taught to a lady called Duggirala Jagadamba and a lady called Sri Rajitam, both Devadasis. I'm using the term for convenience, in Andhra Pradesh. Tadepalli Peraya taught to Krishnaveni Nangigadda. Nangigadda Krishnaveni, Dr. Arudra is with us. He has had the opportunity to interview Nangigadda Krishnaveni, and she has said, we have the tapes. And also he taught a lady called Bharatanatyam, who was a Dasi, who was dancing in Repalle. Yeleswarapu Venkateshwarlu, he accompanied the troops of dancing girls, not just taught them, accompanied them as a Sutradhara when they did the Kalapams. Then Bhagavatula Vissaya, he trained, again he also gave training to Nangigadda Krishnaveni and Balatripurasundari. These are only a few of the examples. We have any number. And Mahankali Chalapati, I spoke to one of his own successors who has told me that he has taught the Annabattula family as well. Now, how much interaction and interchange of techniques or repertoire there have, I don't know. There may have been between the Bhagavatams, the Melas of the Brahmins and the Melams of the Kalavantulu. However, there was interaction. This is almost beyond doubt now. Now I'm going to come to the actual solo format and start demonstrating a little bit. The Yakshagana Bhagavata Mela Kalapam, so Yakshagana to Bhagavata Mela to Kalapam, this transition which has created the base for today's Kuchipudi, it points to a continuity of a dramatic tradition. Anna was right when he said that the process was reversed, because when the previous speaker was speaking, this is exactly what I thought, that from dance drama to solo in the case of Kuchipudi and solo to dance drama in the case of Kathak, I mean they're actually counterpoints to each other. Now, this the Yakshagana to Bhagavat Mela to Kalapam transition has created the base for today's Kuchipudi, but it points to the continuity of a dramatic tradition, whereas the solo dance corpus was very much the mainstay of the Devadasi dancing system. So there is a possibility that we can consider that the solo items could have been given by the Devadasis in exchange for the Kalapams which they took from the Bhagavatulu. This I have already elaborated. This vital interactive link between the solo dancer of Andhra and the dancer of the Bhagavata Mela has to be researched separately, and we must establish date, antiquity and so on, and we will leave it at that point now. But from this juncture, Kuchipudi dance entered a very important phase, because I referred to the names of the Bhagavatulu who had taught the Devadasis. I am coming to the solo now. From this juncture, the trio of Kuchipudi, the trio of Kuchipudi, by them I mean Vedantam Lakshminarayan Shastri, Vempati Venkat Narayan Shastri and Chinta Venkatramaya. Now they were what we call the trinity of Kuchipudi. They took this quintessential features of Kuchipudi to new heights, and they were the first to introduce actual composed items. Notable amongst these items were Athana Jatiswaram. That was a contribution of Vedantam Lakshminarayan Shastri. Another notable inclusion was the practice of Tarangams were already danced, but the practice of dancing on a brass plate and putting a pot on the head and all this also was a contribution of this artist, this guru. Besides this, Shabdams, Padams, Shlokas, etc. were introduced only at this point. And thus the solo trends of Kuchipudi had their seeds sown between 1930 and 1950. And it was heralded by the traditional gurus themselves, who felt the need to expand the scope of Kuchipudi to make it accessible to wider section of students from non-traditional families. Because only at this time Kuchipudi came out. What I mean by non-traditional families is that the Kuchipudi was in the hands of one community or one agraharam, and when the gurus started traveling outside, then girls from other backgrounds, non-traditional means non-paramparic families, came in to learn. First of all, it was a very big threshold to cross to accept to teach girls, but secondly also to have items which are suitable for girls. Because till then, with the exception of Bhama Kalapam and the subsequent Golla Kalapam and the subsequent Natakas, like Usha Parinayam, a lot of people think this is a Yakshagana. It is not, it's a Natakam. Usha Parinayam and Girija Kalyanam, Parvati Parinayam and so on. The length is very, the list is quite lengthy. Number of Natakas, they were all group presentations. So when one girl wanted to learn, they needed to have a repertoire. So that is how they built up the repertoire of Kuchipudi, by starting to extract the Nritta portions from whatever they had. They were practicing the Vyakaranam, and he had put it beautifully together in the Athana Jatiswaram, which is still, I think, the most frequently danced item in Kuchipudi. And